Good morning, everyone. I wonder if we could first start maybe with a question to the audience. I know it's early, but how many of you, please raise your hand if you are implementing AI in your company? Yes, as expected, a lot of you, and that's because AI is everywhere these days, but it doesn't always live up to expectations. A recent MIT report found that 95% of Gen AI pilots fail to scale, not because the models don't work, but because of a learning gap in tools and organizations. Today, I'm joined by two AI experts who can help bridge that gap. Alice, who leads early-stage startup efforts for OpenAI across EMEA and Asia-Pacific, helping founders leverage OpenAI's tech, and Silviu, founder and CTO of Deltia. Did I say that correctly?
Deltia.
Okay, thank you. AI, a Berlin-based startup that uses AI to optimize manual assembly processes in factories. Let's dive straight in. Alice, Silviu, how do you identify where AI can deliver real results for businesses?
Shall I?
Yeah.
All right. Good morning, everyone. Very excited to be here. Let's talk about AI. I'm coming from the industrial tech space, been in the enterprise sector for the better part of 10 years, building self-driving cars, and large corporation, so I hope I can identify with some of you, and now I'm building a startup in the same space, delivering value to factories. So when thinking of the value that AI delivers today and how to identify those areas, I think, and especially in the space of industrial tech, everything's driven by return on investment. Everything's driven by measurable value that you can generate. And in that sense, looking at how to identify those spaces, at least for us, everything starts with unit economics. AI is an impressive technology, something that is able to empower people to deliver more with less resources, and we see this in the software industry. If I look at my team that was building prototypes for self-driving cars, I think we can deliver similar solutions with 50% of the manpower using, let's say, today's tools empowered by AI. And that's basically what we're doing at Deltia today as well. And for our factories, in that sense, generating this ability to build more products, to generate more output, to generate more revenue with the same resources is where you want to be, where you want to build solutions for.
Maybe I'll give a bit more of the enterprise side. So I work really closely with startups at OpenAI across EMEA today, but previously I've worked with a lot of our enterprise businesses when I first joined. What we've seen works really well in enterprise businesses is when there's both a mix of, I think, top-down and a bottom-up approach. So on the bottom-up side, that's making sure you have employee feedback and having their input to have that early trust in the loop. And then really from top down, strong leadership and vision around how the two marry together and work, AI and your staff and employees work together as opposed to against each other. I think that's led to really successful results, and that really bridges together at the training, at the communication point, making sure that you have strong champions to deploy out the use cases. But that's where we've seen really successful deployments of AI across enterprises. And then similarly with the startups that I work with, it's really understanding and the use case and making sure that you're drilling down into it. And if you don't have the right use case fit, you're not going into production, then you end up exactly back at square one.
And are there practical steps that you find companies often miss when they're adopting AI?
The cases where we've seen potentially less success in rollouts or execution or really the impacts of AI in an organization stem from a few different components. I think the baseline is when there isn't the right use case and the right problem that you're solving for, and therefore you just don't go into production and you end up exactly where you started. That stems from two parts. Again, from the top, it's leadership and not having actually a strong vision, not having the right benchmarks, knowing what success actually looks like, and whether that's just simple time savings or how that actually impacts revenue or customer retention, having those hard metrics from day one and know what you're working towards. And then the second piece we've seen is we're very used to a software to solve and align it to a specific department. I think with AI and as we move more towards agents, it's a lot less around aligning solutions to a department, but to actual workflows. The reason being, departments tend to be linear, but with AI agents, they sit really at the center. And so instead of it being, hey, I'm just solving for customer support for marketing as a use case, and that being something that sits separately traditionally, we're seeing AI agents that can handle customer support for marketing requests, sales requests, and then being able to, customer support requests, and then being able to route it. And so it's cross-functional in how it touches multiple teams and departments, not just one single department. So you're not solving for just one specific team, you're solving for the entire workflow and the broader problem.
So once we've got our AI integrated, we've identified the use case, we need to see if it's working and ultimately ready to scale. Silvia, maybe I could ask you first. How do you measure success in AI projects? And are there key metrics or signals that you would recommend people watch out for?
Yeah, definitely. I'm looking at usually 3 levels. The first one is usage metrics. If you deploy something, especially in, let's say, a B2B context, but I mean also B2C, one of the leading indicators of if your solution is being used is by just following what your users are doing. This doesn't necessarily guarantee success, though. The next step is operational KPIs. So understanding how this has an impact on the customer that you sold the solution to, this AI-enabled solution. And in this sense, things like, well, revenue generated by your solution, the return on investment is one very important factor. And I guess the third one, and this is where I connect with what you were mentioning, there are a lot of factors that influence the success of an AI solution that's being deployed at large or at scale, is that customer going to expand with you after the pilot, after a successful deployment? Yeah, so that's for me the last and the third level and metric that kind of coins the success of a deployment at scale.
Sure. And what about for you, Alice? Are there sort of common ways in which you can see a founder is implementing AI successfully?
Yeah, the ones that, and I'll just getting very practical, I think you've touched on a lot of it already, but the founders that I work closely with that I found have had a lot of success are the ones that will go in and make sure that they're tied to a key stakeholder at the leadership level and have them be really involved in the POC and the pilot from day one. Those are the folks that are going to choose individuals that might be levels down from them to actually be directly involved and then become those champions to push and deploy that product out a lot more broadly. But having that direct tie to someone that impacts their bottom line, their numbers, how they think about revenue, how they think about projecting out for forecasting, that's where I've seen it goes from a pilot phase or some sort of POC to actual full rollout.
Sure. And we talked a lot of signals of something going right. What about when it's going wrong? When do you know that it's time to abandon an AI project or pivot to something new? Are there red flags that you can look out for?
I'd be curious to hear yours from experience.
I mean, there are a few early warning moments, and since AI is such an exciting technology, when working, let's say, with industrial partners, there's the effect of this new shiny thing, where, let's say, leaders from a company, they are also measured in their ability to attract and place in a company AI topics. They get budget, they get rewarded for that. Unfortunately, this leads to the fact that some startups, solution providers, get attracted into participate into innovation cycles of big companies And you kind of become that instrument for that person to make a career in a company based on, let's say, vitamin pill instead of a painkiller. An early warning system is the moment where you think you have customers, but your customers attract your product into placing it into innovation venues in the company, but you don't actually deploy at scale. That's very, very dangerous. Another one is, again, not hitting rollouts. I mean, everything's driven by the market. If you're not able to release it, then you're going to have to pivot.
Do you see any red flags yourself, Alice, quite commonly with the startups you work with?
Maybe not as much of a red flag, but putting more of a positive spin on that, like the green flags where I'm like, they're going to be successful, is when they can really move fast with speed and intention. I think there's a lot of noise, and making sure you know what to focus on and to block out some of the other noise. And then when you're not, there's no ego tied to the tech that you've built as well. As labs, as new technology gets developed, being okay with letting go of some of the code, which can be really tough, but in the long run, making that switch now is the right thing to do and will solve a lot of headache in the future. Those are the ones where I think are of us green flags, and then I guess the ones where I've seen and have concerns around are the ones that have look at it from the other direction.
Sure. So we talked quite broadly about success and failure in AI. I was wondering if we could also maybe look at some more specific examples. Could either of you, from your own experiences, share some concrete examples of where AI has driven revenues, efficiencies, or customer satisfaction? Any really memorable examples of those?
I mean, our product by nature delivers value in the industrial space. And in that sense, we have had quite a few customers where we were able to improve the efficiency of the factory to 10, 20, 30%. So maybe as a particular example, I remember a partner from the furniture industry. They were under a lot of pressure, market pressure. They had the possibility to build more, so to grow by 30%. They were not able to hire, though, at the same pace. If they were increasing wages or moving production somewhere else, there would be associated costs, so dropping in market share. We were able to help them to identify waste and maintain and improve these processes. But I remember specifically the early days when we moved from POC to scale. Before going that way, the aha moment was when the line manager says, well, your data is wrong. And we go and scrutinize the data, and we look together at the data, and no, I mean, it's right. And they had a manufacturing execution system where they're pulling their data from, and it was an aha moment for them because they realized that the data they have doesn't really actually capture what's happening on the shop floor. And this is the leeway that allowed us to basically generate those 30% for them.
I think I love hearing the startup use cases and how you've all been able to really solve and implement solutions into these enterprise businesses. I'll maybe give more of what I've seen on the enterprise side that we've deployed. We work really closely with Zalando, so fashion retailer here in Europe. We've been able to, with the use of GPT-4o, and actually saw quite a shift when we went from 3.5 to 4o even, in the production quality of their fashion shopping assistant. And so went from, I think it was lower, like single or double digits, over to 20, 30% increases in how many click-through rates that they have and what that actual turnover was into a purchase being made. And so those are really interesting to see how those get measured. And that was a key target. It wasn't just, we want to save customer support time on XYZ. It was like, we want this to actually directly drive revenue. And so seeing those use cases really come to life are exciting. But I could talk about I think the use cases that are most exciting are the ones you're going to see that startups push out and deploy, they're the ones that are really pushing the technology. And so I could go on for days about all the cool use cases I've seen and the way that people are leveraging models and the technology today.
Sure. Well, I guess on that subject, what do you think enterprises and startups can learn from each other? What could startups learn from OpenAI's success with AI? And vice versa, what could your startup maybe teach enterprises about implementing AI?
I would love to see actually a world where the two just work a lot closer together. I think the impact that you're going to have in manufacturing is outsized to what just one enterprise business within that industry and space can actually do themselves. So really seeing how the two kind of come together, I think startups are the ones that are going to push the limits of the specific use cases, build out technology, whether it's in hardware, software, that sometimes enterprise businesses don't always have the full capacity for. And that's because startups can work with such speed, such rigor, be able to make decisions quickly, make changes quickly, and really adapt to the environment. And then hinging on the enterprise, I think you see a lot of really cool ideas that come up. And they are really flashy, they have their consumer moment, but to have the really big business impact, it's making sure that that is then something that's feasible and can be used long-term by especially with enterprises, making sure that you embed and work closely with them to understand what matters to them, and it's not just this cool, flashy product, but something that has a long-lasting shelf life there.
Yeah, I can only agree with what you said. I mean, the strengths of the two combined would probably be the best way to move forward. But looking at startups, speed of experimentation and iterating is probably one of the most important aspects that needs to be thrown in the mix. And looking at my past days in corporate, I guess the strength was rigorosity. Back then, we were building safety-critical systems. So you can forget about vibe coding in that context. You can forget about fast experimentation. There was a lot of focus on building things right. And that came at a risk because you might have built things right, but they were not the right things. So that was kind of the risk that I encountered very often in the context of corporates. I mean, something that at least we have learned for ourselves is in combining that having a fast innovation loop, one that moves with the speed of experimenting in a startup-like setting, and the rigorosity of deploying this in production that scales is probably the best way to go for this kind of technology.
Brilliant. And we've talked a lot about what works today. Perhaps we could briefly look into the future. Which trends or applications in AI, maybe if we could just stick to one each, are you most excited about that are emerging at the moment and might make it big in the next 12 to 18 months?
I was just saying, I think there's a lot around agents, multimodal, et cetera. Personally, very excited to see what happens more on the hardware and the robotics side. There's incredible startups and ideas coming out of like ATH Zurich from that when I speak to folks in across Europe, across the region, a lot of excitement to get hands-on with some of the newer, smaller models, the open source capabilities that really allow for more of a hardware robotics push. And I think that's probably the space you guys are operating somewhat in, so I'll let you touch on that a bit more. But I think that's where I'm more excited to see what happens. There's going to be a lot that happens in multimodal and in agents. Very excited about voice, Sora, et cetera. But I think longer term, beyond the next 12 months, that's where I would keep my eye on.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I can only agree. I mean, in our space right now, probably the next frontier is deploying visual language models on the shop floor. It's something that generates real value and something that also raises quite a bit of complexity because, I mean, the research has produced these brilliant topologies that are quite heavy though, and packaging them and deploying them in such a fashion that they can run on embedded hardware in a factory is not necessarily trivial, but will come. If I go beyond the, let's say, next 12 months, and I also look at the volume of data that, at least in our case, has been accumulated in terms of processes and what's happening on the shop floor, then physical AI definitely is the one that takes the cherry on top. So not only telling people what problems they have, but solving them through automation.
Sure. We're pretty much bang out of time, but before we leave, I was wondering if there's one very brief tip you could share with the audience. If there was one takeaway you could give them about implementing AI, what would that be from each of you? Very brief, if possible, because we're right out of time.
All right, then very brief. I know that AI as a technology allows one to build something very, very fast. And I really, really think that one should not build a solution in search of a problem, but if possible, solve a problem.
Okay, Alice?
I would say probably the same. And I think I've said a lot of it and just reiterating, but know what you're solving for, know what the problem is, solve for the workflow, not for a team, a department, a specific kind of function. Think a bit bigger picture, and then have an understanding of what you want the broader organization to look like, or the broader company and enterprise business to look like in not just the next 12 months, but 5 years, 10 years down the line.
That's a great tip to end on. Silvio, Alice, thank you so much for joining us, and thank you to this great audience for listening. Cheers.
Thank you very much.
Yeah. Thank you.